Hello guys, another video today. Today actually we're gonna go back and talk more about old fashions. You're probably confused and wondering why I would like to talk more about it after two videos about it. Mainly because of I think two things. First, it is my favorite drink. It's really easy to make. If I make it at home as my nightcap, it takes maybe honestly 15 seconds, no joke. It's really quick and easy to make once you get used to your proportions and to what you want to do. Second is it is very simple, and at the same time it requires so much expertise to perfect a real good old-fashioned. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's go back a little bit and look into the ingredients of an old-fashioned. I mentioned there are three main ingredients. You need a base spirit, you need a sweetener, and you need a bitter. Those three create the flavor that would give you the perfect old-fashioned. You need the three flavors to be balanced. If you put too much liquor in there or spirit, it would taste too boozy. Some people like that. There's nothing against that. If you like your old-fashioned boozy, that's great. Props to you. But if you want it to be balanced, you want to make sure you have enough sweetener there and you have enough bitterness as well. So once all those flavors are meshed together, and like even the orange peel, the sourness from the orange peel and the oil will create that whole flavor that makes this old-fashioned really good. So what am I gonna focus on today? Today we're gonna focus on the type of sweetener you would use. In order to create a really good old-fashioned, you need to understand your ingredients. You need to know how adding a little bit of something will affect the flavor. So today we're going to talk about different types of sweeteners out there. There's a lot more, but these are the basic ones that I would typically use when I create an old-fashioned. So here we go. To your right, we have here honey. It's honey syrup. I have organic honey here, and I just created my own syrup. How do you create your own syrup? Well, there are two different ways. Well, there's actually one way, but I have my own way. But the recommended way is to put 1 part of water to every 3 parts of honey. So that means when you mix it, it becomes diluted enough so it's easier to mix it in your drink. Now my preferred method will be the opposite. It's 1 part honey to 3 parts water, so it's a little bit more diluted. Which is the correct way? There's really no correct way. You could do 1-to-1 ratio at any ratio you like. It really depends actually on the type of honey you get. Some of them are really thick, others are processed and more or less viscous or more liquid, so you don't really need to dilute them as much. My reasoning as to why I want to dilute them 1 to 3 is that I don't want to add too much sweetness. A more diluted honey syrup will be easier to control when experimenting or creating my drinks. So that's my personal preference. But once you figured out your proportion, your concentrations, then kudos to you. Use your own recipe. One here in the middle is agave syrup. People use it mainly in drinks. People use it mainly for margaritas. Anything that uses tequila, mainly because agave is from a plant that has flavor notes that would help enhance the tequila drink. And right here, I'll jump to your far left will be what we call the sugar cane. There are 2 types. There is what we call a demerara, which is more raw, more molasses in there. It's a little bit more whole. Or what others would call turbinado, which is more refined, which could be in powdered form. So when would I use which type of syrup? Well, here's the thing. You want to understand what type of flavor notes or the flavor profile of your spirit, and second, your syrup. As for myself, tonight we're gonna play with honey. Let's set this aside. Okay, so this is honey right here. Now, what will I make out of honey? Well, this type of honey specifically is out of wildflower. So that means I want to think of a drink that is floral, that will help me kind of enhance that flavor at the same time not really compete with it. So I could think of a gin. Why gin? Mainly because gins are distilled through botanicals, herbs, and things like that. You could use any gin, but for tonight, my gin would be Ganika coffee. I'm a huge fan of Japanese whiskeys or drinks or gins. Japanese gins are really well done. This one has flavor notes of Japanese citruses, Japanese flowers, and some apples actually. So that's what I would use. And the third component is the bitter. What type of bitter would you use? Well, that's another way to change or to experiment with, and that's why I like old fashioned so much, because you get so flexible with the flavors by just changing one ingredient. But tonight, what I would use is cucumber bitters. And so let me go ahead and get a glass and set it here. Let me grab some ice. I got here some clear ice. I would just put it in there. It's too big. It's fine. Just let it sit in there. We don't need a mixing glass. You could just let it sit in your drinking glass, or the old-fashioned glass as we call it. Which one should we use? Well, like I mentioned earlier, I prefer the more diluted one, mainly because I have more control with the flavor. But the thing with that is, because there's more water, you have to be careful about adding too much. You will dilute the drink too much. So how do I measure it? Well, I typically measure my syrups through the bar spoon, and this one I would typically just do 3 or 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. And a typical old-fashioned will always use 2 ounces of your spirit, so I'll just put 2 ounces of gin in there. Here we go. And then finally, I would add my bitters. Maybe a dash or 2 will work. I put 3. That's okay, you could do that. And the last portion is the peel. What would I use? I think for this drink, lemon would be a good peel to use. It has flavors or oils that will not really overpower the rest of the ingredients. But here's the peel. Go ahead and twist it. Some people would like to put it in there. I don't, like I mentioned in my previous videos. And there you go, guys. Old fashioned. Let me try it. See if it's actually good. Oh wow. That's really good. Yes.